A very good evening to all the listeners and delegates. I am CA Aditya Dhanuka, and today I've been given an opportunity by CA Sansar to present a presentation on restrictions on input tax credit under Section 17(5), or in colloquial terms, what we mention as block credit. Now, ITC is a very common term which we are all aware of, and I hope that we do not need to go into in the basics. So I'll quickly run down through the relevant and linked provisions so that we can then seamlessly connect the restrictions so imposed in the utilization and usage of ITC. Now, the provisions of input tax credit are provided in Chapter 5 of CGST Act covering Section 16 to 21 and Chapter 5 of CGST rules covering Rules 36 to Rule 45. Now, the basic definitions provided in the CGST Act in reference to input tax credit are as input tax as defined in the Act means the CGST, SGST, IGST, or UTGST charged on any supply of goods or services or both made to a taxable person and includes any tax paid by the person on import of goods or any such tax paid by the person under reverse charge mechanism. Input tax credit means the credit of input tax. Now, input tax credit has been further subdivided into two components, one being input service and other being inputs. So, input service basically means any service which is used or intended to be used by the supplier in his course of furtherance of business. Whereas inputs are defined to mean any goods other than capital goods which are intended to be used or used by a supplier in the course of furtherance of business. So inputs are basically, we can say that they are for all tangible items, whereas for any services that we receive, those are classified as input services. Now, once again, in tangible items, goods can be further subdivided into two categories, one being in the nature of goods and the other being in the nature of capital goods. These have also been further defined in the CGST Act as capital goods are goods, the value of which is capitalized in the books of accounts of the person claiming the ITC, which are again used or intended to be used in the course of furtherance of business. Whereas goods means every kind of movable property except money and securities, but they include actionable claims, growing crops, grass, and things attached to a forming part of earth, which are agreed to be severed before supply or under a contract of supply. As mentioned before, that input is primarily categorized into two components as input services and inputs. So for services also, the definition has been provided for in the GST Act, which clarifies that services mean anything except goods, money, and securities, but they include activities relating to the use of money or its conversion by cash or by any other mode from one form or to another. So if we again delve into the definition of service, we'll see that the scope of service is wide. It's immeasurable because they are saying that services mean anything other than goods, and goods are every kind of immovable property. Now we have to also to understand the basic intent, because this paragraph in the course or furtherance of business was mentioned in basically all the definitions that were provided for. So the legislative intent for availment of input tax credit under the CGST Act is that the inputs must be used in business. Now the scope of in the course or furtherance of business for ITC availment in GST has been significantly widened in comparison to the condition under the pre-GST regime, that is VAT, service tax, and excise regime, because in that regime it was restricted to being used in the manufacture of goods or provision of output services. So if I tend to explain what I mean, now there are a lot of services or goods that we procure which directly do not result in any outward supply. So in the previous regime, such inputs was restricted because the definition was a narrow one, which specified that output input will be available if the said goods are used in the manufacture or provision of output services. Now, input again is available only when the same is used in the course or furtherance of business. So, business has also been defined in the GST law as any trade, commerce, manufacture, profession, vocation, adventure, wager, or any similar activity, whether or not it is for a pecuniary benefit. Now, the purpose of giving such a wide definition by the department is because a number of people tend to classify their activities as either a one-time activity or an activity not in the nature of profit. So they want to escape the clutches of taxation under this garb. So the department has taken care of this by clarifying that any activity that you do, whether you earn a profit out of it or not, whether you do it on a regular basis or one time basis, becomes totally irrelevant. Any such transaction which is done is a business, and therefore accordingly the provisions of the law will apply. Now, as provided that input tax credit starts from section 16 until section 21. So section 16 subsection 1 allows for the availment of ITC, but there are subject certain conditions which have to be satisfied. The first being that the receiver must be a registered person. So if I am not registered under GST, of course I cannot take any registration of the input tax credit so paid by me. If I avail any goods or services as an unregistered entity, in that case, that tax would become a cost to me. So the receiver must be a registered person. And the second condition, again, being reiterated, then the supplies are meant to be used or intended to be used by such person in the course of furtherance of his business. Now, registered person has also been defined in the Act, that a person who is registered under the GST law, but does not include any person having a unique identity number or UIN. The department, on its own part, has been very prudent and careful enough to cover all aspects so that there is no scope of any misclarification on the part of the taxpayers. Now, Section 16(2) further provides the conditions for availment of ITC by a registered person. There are basically four conditions: that he must be in the possession of a tax invoice, he must receive such goods or services, the tax that has been charged to him must actually be paid to the government treasury, and the relevant return must be filed. Moving further, other conditions that have been provided for availing SENVAT credit are as: the goods should have been received by the person, and when the person delivers the goods to any person on the direction provided to such person. This basically covers the scope of bill to ship to model. Because if A purchases the goods from B but directs B to supply the same to C directly, in that case, A has not received the goods in his warehouse. How so? The scope of availment of input tax credit by A becomes redundant. Therefore, to cover this anomaly, the government has clarified that if the goods are delivered to a third person on the behalf of the buyer, then it would be deemed that the buyer has received the goods and he can claim the applicable input on such items. Now, a number of instances happen that goods are sometimes received on lots or installments basis. In that case, the government has said that you will be able to claim input tax credit only when you have received the last lot or installment as provided for in the invoice. So here, the business houses bypass this provision by breaking up the invoice in accordance with the delivery provisions. Now, let's say I have taken an order for delivering 100 tons, but if I am delivering in lots of 20 tons, but I issue a same invoice, then the purchaser will have an issue because he'll not be able to take the input tax credit of the first 80 tons until the last 20 are delivered to him. Therefore, tax planning mechanism in this case can be that invoice should be prepared on the basis of the delivery lot only, so that there is no mismatch as such. Further, government has also laid down the provisions that if the purchaser has received any goods or services, he must pay within 180 days to the supplier. If the payment of the invoice, that is the value of goods and tax, has not been paid, then in that case, the supplier is liable to reverse the input tax credit, and he can claim such input only if he pays. So now this provision has been linked to maintain continuity in business, because if a purchaser does not pay up to the supplier, then the supplier has to deposit the tax from his own pocket, which leads to a burden of working capital on his part. That is why, to take care of this anomaly, the government has restricted the input tax credit on account of non-payment. Most of these provisions have been carried over from the erstwhile regime of excise and service tax. Further, in the definitions, I talked about capital goods. So when we capitalize any item in our balance sheet, we claim the depreciation on that over the period of years. Now the government has clarified in that aspect also that in case of capital goods, if an item has been capitalized and you are claiming depreciation, you must ensure that the tax amount has not been capitalized. Either a taxpayer has an option of claiming ITC on such capital goods, or he can capitalize the tax paid and thereafter claim depreciation spread over the life of the asset. This provision has been introduced so as to avoid double benefit to the taxpayer and loss to the government exchequer. Further, the registered person shall not be entitled any input tax credit in respect of any invoice or debit note for supply of goods or services after the due date of furnishing the return under Section 39 for the month of September following the end of financial year to which such invoice or debit note pertains to. Now, this provision is saying that in case where businesses, because of time lag, have a delay in booking the invoices, the government has given a grace period of only 6 tax periods. So, any invoice pertaining to a financial year, the input tax credit of such invoice can be availed only up till the due date of return filing of September of the next financial year. Because if this provision is not in place, then a taxpayer can bring an invoice of 2017-18, let's say, and he can claim an input tax credit today itself, which will lead to a lot of chaos and mayhem. This provision again was brought about in service tax and has been carried over in GST law. Now, coming to the main aspect of the presentation, the apportionment and blocking of input tax credits. So Section 17 deals with these provisions. Section 17 has first restricted input tax credit to so much of ITC which is attributable to the purposes of an assessee's business. Now a lot of people, they procure goods and services or capital goods in the name of their business, but it necessarily is not meant for business. So insofar the same is identifiable, the government has clarified that input tax credit should be taken on proportionate basis only to that extent which is relatable to the business aspect and not to something which is outside the business. Further, input tax credit is also restricted to so much of input tax as is attributable to the taxable supplies, which is and including zero rated supplies. Now, there are a lot of outward supplies in which the tax is not payable at all. These are classified as exempt supplies or non taxable supplies. In order to provide those services or goods, a number of inputs may have been taken by the taxpayer on which he has taken attributable input tax credit. So to cover that anomaly, the government has also again clarified that input tax credit will be allowed only when your output is also payable. In case you have no corresponding service or goods on which an output tax is payable, then to that extent you cannot claim your input tax credit also. Further, value of exempt supply, as I had mentioned before, exempt supply is those supplies on which no tax is payable. So the value of exempt supply will also include supplies on which the recipient is liable to pay tax on reverse charge basis, transaction in securities, and sale of land and building. Now, these, if we can recollect with the definitions of goods and services, we will see that transaction in securities, land and building were outside the scope of goods and services. Since these elements are not covered in GST, therefore any such input attributable to these items should also not be taken. Further, in case of banking companies, an option has been provided to such assessees that either they have an option of availing 50% of the total input tax credit they have in their credit ledger, or they may follow the provision just discussed that they can claim such input on proportionate basis. Moving forward, now coming to section 17.5, which covers the specific restrictions which are not allowed as input tax credit in GST regime. Now, section 17.5 is overriding because it starts with a notwithstanding condition. So, notwithstanding anything contained in section 16 subsection 1 and subsection 18 subsection 1. Now, section 16 subsection 1 deals with the eligibility of ITC. So section 17 subsection 5 is overriding the eligibility of ITC. This means that even if such expenses which we will be discussing right now are incurred in the course or furtherance of business, even in that case, such input tax credit availed by the business would not be allowed unless a condition has been prescribed therein. So the first restriction is in case of motor vehicles, that motor vehicles, input tax of motor vehicles will not be allowed to any assessee except when such motor vehicle is purchased for further supply, that is a car dealer, transportation of passengers, or imparting motor car training on those vehicles. Now, a number of changes have been brought about in the GST law since the day it has been implemented. So previously, it mentioned motor vehicle and other conveyances. The government has segregated that as motor vehicle in section 17 subsection 5 clause A, and the other conveyances have been detailed in 5 AA. Now motor vehicles specifically uh, also had a confusion when the GST law had come into place, that direct input of purchase of motor vehicles was not allowable. However, what about the expenses which are incurred in relation to motor vehicles, such as those incurred in the case of repair, maintenance, or insurance? So the government in the CGST Amendment Act 2018 clarified this aspect also, that if input tax credit on a motor vehicle is not allowable, then input tax on expenses incurred on such motor vehicle will also not be allowable. This was a very litigative aspect. However, this has been taken care of since the notification has been brought into effect from 1st February 2019. Similar to 17.5A, 17.5AA is also worded, which covers vessels and aircraft. Now, input tax on vessels and aircrafts is also not allowable except when the same is used for further supply, say in the case of airlines or airline manufacturers, transportation of goods and passengers, and imparting flying or navigational trainings on those aircrafts or vessels. Moving on to 17.5AB, the services of general insurance, repair, maintenance, etc. in relation to the vehicles, as we discussed, that clause was inserted with effect from 1st of February 2019. Further restrictions provided for in 17.5 are food and beverage, outdoor catering, beauty treatment, health services, cosmetic and plastic surgery, leasing, renting, and hiring of motor vehicles, etc., except when these are used for the purposes specified therein. The purposes specified therein are that input tax credit in case of these specified services is available only if I have a taxable outward supply of the same category or an element of a taxable composite or mixed supply within the category. Let's take an example of food and beverage. Now, most of business houses incur expenses in relation to canteen services, or for customers, they raise a party in any five-star hotel. So, in that case, the billing that is received by such business house is primarily of food and beverage only. So, a number of business houses used to divert their personal expenditure also in the name of their business. So, in order to control and curb these revenue leakages to the government, such restriction has been brought into place. Therefore, if a event manager incurs an expenditure on food and beverage, then such person can very easily claim such input, because the objective or purpose of the event manager is to further supply such food and beverage. Same applies for other services also, as mentioned. However, health insurance and life insurance are also not allowable. The input on these two services also would be allowed only if claiming or taking such insurance of the workmen or the employees is mandatory under any law for such business entity. Say in the case of coal mines, a health insurance of all the miners is mandatory under the relevant act. Therefore, any insurance taken by a coal mining company would be allowed as eligible input tax credit. However, for any service provider, let's say a software company, if it takes any kind of insurance for its employees or its directors or KMP, in that scenario, any amount paid as GST would have to be charged to their PL. In similar lines, membership of club, health, fitness center, and travel benefit extended to employees as in the nature of perquisites will not be allowable. They ITC paid on such services also would not be eligible, and they again in that case would be available if such services are obligatory for an employer to provide. Till the time these benefits are provided by a company to their employees on its own vocation, in that case, the company cannot claim any input tax benefit. The difference, as mentioned in the two tables, is that in case of the first table, ITC is available if the business entity has an outward supply under the same category. However, for the second table, which covers membership of club, health, fitness center, and travel benefits, even if we have a same nature of outward supply, input tax credit is not allowable. Input tax credit in this case is allowed only if the same is permissible by law. Moving forward, immovable property 17.5C and 17.5D. Now, these two provisions are the most hotly debated provisions in terms of construction sector, because most of the business houses again purchase immovable property or purchase a factory or construct a factory for continuing their operations. So, while such expenses are incurred in relation to business and are directly attributable to outward supply, even then, the government has specifically excluded the ITC from the scope. They have clearly said that either if you break the contract as supply of goods or services, or you take a lump sum contract as a works contract service, in either of the situation, input tax credit would be available only if it is used for further supply of works contract services. So, in effect, only a contractor is eligible to claim such services, or a developer is eligible to claim input tax credit on such goods or services. Other than them, no further entity is allowed to take any benefit. However, they have given an proviso that plant and machinery, the construction of immovable property, excepting plant and machinery, is disallowed. So, what is plant and machinery has also been clarified by the department so as to avoid any confusions. A plant and machinery has been defined to mean any apparatus, equipment, and machinery fixed to earth by foundation or structural support. So now when we mention foundation or structural support, we mean the civil work that has to be done to install or set up the machinery. So to that extent only, the civil work input is allowed to a business manufacturing entity. Otherwise, no input is allowed to any business entity in relation to immovable property. Further list of input tax credits which are blocked are goods or services which are or both on which tax has been paid under Section 10. Now, Section 10 deals with the composition scheme. So, any person who has registered under composition scheme, he will not be eligible to claim input tax credit on the inward supply of any goods or services so received by him. Moving on, goods or services are both received by a non-resident taxable person. Any person residing outside India who comes in India for a short-term visit and does any business, he has to take registration under goods and service tax. However, if the person procures any goods or services locally, no input would be allowable. But if that non-resident taxable person had imported any goods or services, to that limited extent, input tax credit would be allowable to such person. Further, goods or services or both used for personal consumption is also blocked under GST. Now, personal consumption again takes a very wide scope, and in the last couple of years, when COVID had hit everyone, this claimed a lot of importance because the use of sanitizers was hotly debated that whether use of sanitizers would classify as continuing business or personal consumption. There have been divergent opinions on this aspect, but ultimately it rests on the risk appetite of the business house as to whether they want to claim input tax credit on such items or not. Goods lost, stolen, destroyed, written off, or disposed of by way of gift of free samples is again blocked under input tax credit. However, this point is again hotly debated because there are goods which are lost under the manufacturing process also. A number of jurisprudence is there which has more or less settled it down that any goods lost or destroyed on account of manufacturing loss is not to be classified under this subcategory and no reversal is required. This clause has to be read in a very simpliciter form, and any goods lost, stolen, destroyed as such only are to be considered for the purposes of reversal of input tax credit availed if any. Further, lastly, any tax paid in accordance with the provision of Section 74, 129, and 130. Now, these sections deal with notices. If any notice have been received by an assessee, pursuant to which the assessee thinks that he can claim after paying such tax the said input tax credit, the department has clarified that no input tax credit would be allowable if any tax is paid in connection or in pursuance to any proceedings initiated by the department. Now, some practical issues have also been compiled by me, which in my professional practice I had come across. One being warranty replacements. Now, let's say a car dealer has supplied some part to a customer free of cost. In that case, what is the treatment to be done for such items? Again, it's very clear professionally that insurance is also a cost which has already been factored when the car was sold. So it is not really free as such, and the price has already been paid in advance. Therefore, in this case, no input tax reversal is required as per my humble opinion. Now, in case of an example has also been taken that 100 vehicles have been procured from manufacturer and two vehicles have been kept for test drive and not sold. So whether credit would be available on such vehicles or not, because हम कोई भी कभी गाड़ी खरीदते हैं, we always want to try it out. So this is an expense on the part of the showroom dealer that they have to purchase such cars and keep it in handy so that the customer can try their hand out. And if being satisfied with the vehicle, they may purchase continue to purchase the vehicle. In that case, an AR has been released by in case of Chogle Industries that has held that ITC of demo vehicle shall be admissible. There are another contradicting ARs also which have said that since such vehicles are not resulting in any outward supply, and 17.5 has clearly said that in case of motor vehicles, input shall be available only if it is used for further supply. So in that limited extent, no input will be allowable for demo vehicles. So in most of these cases, we'll see that there are divergent opinions. But if the assessee is ready to face or lock horns with the department authorities, then in such cases, valid input tax credit should be taken. Next issue is healthcare facilities provided by an employer to its employees and their dependents free of charge. In that case, whether the employer will be eligible for input tax credit on such inward supplies, because in case of especially in case of factories or large containments, we see that the employees stay within the premises. So basic facilities, basic living facilities including healthcare are provided by the employer only. In that case, in case of Chennai Port Trust, the assessee went to the advanced ruling authorities, and therein it was held that treatments, including medicines, provided free of cost to employees and their dependents, are for personal consumption, and therefore the applicant, that is Chennai Port Trust, is ineligible to take any input tax credit on the inward supply of medicines for providing health facilities to its employees in its hospital. Now, next issue is distributor of goods. I've taken the example of medicines. Now, that a person who supplies medicines buys three vehicles used for transportation of medicines. Now, whether credit would be eligible on such vehicles or not. Until 1st of Feb 2019, this would have been a lot of debate on this aspect. However, since the definition has changed after 1st of Feb 2019, it is more or less settled that in case of a goods transport vehicle, no restriction on input tax credit is allowed. Restriction on input tax credit exists only when the vehicle is purchased for movement of passengers and not goods. Now, this does not mean that I purchase a passenger vehicle and stress that I am using that for transportation of goods. The registration requirements, the make and build of a transport vehicle is much different than a transportation vehicle. So we also have to be prudent and careful enough that we do not take any lopsided views which otherwise would result in a bigger loss to the assessee. Now, airlines also have their own buses for transporting passengers within the airport from the checkpoint to the airplane and back. Now, this example I have taken because, as I mentioned in the previous one, which was specifically for distribution of goods. Now, in this case, the buses are used for transporting passengers. So, if you once again go into the restriction condition as given in 17.5a, we would see that the restriction is where uh, the vehicle meant for transportation of passengers has a carrying capacity of less than 13 people, while a bus has a carrying capacity of much more than 13. So again, there is no dispute that this transportation service is used by the airlines in its course of business. Since the definition is excluding this bus service outside, the input can be very easily claimed by the airline operator. Another corresponding example, Instead of an airline operator, if a software company uses the bus for transportation of employees and recovers some portion of expenses from the employees, in this case, whether credit is eligible or not. My answer in this case again remains the same, that credit, of course, will remain eligible. However, a question will come that in case of recoveries being made by the employees, whether that would be deemed as a supply or not. Again, divergent judgments have been given, whereas some, especially the initial one which came in Kerala in case of Caltech Polymers, that was in relation to food, although that any recovery which is made from employees is an supply which is made by a corporate and therefore should be exigible to tax. However, in this specific case of Tata Motors in Delhi tribunal, it was ruled that such recovery is not in the course of business, but it is under an employment agreement. Therefore, no outward supply is payable on that case. Nonetheless, restricting ourselves to the eligibility of credit in this scenario, the answer remains the same as was discussed in the case of airline, that buses being used for transporting passengers and having a carrying capacity of more than 13 people, the input can very well be taken. Next example is boarding and lodging service, which are provided accommodation as well as food as part of the package. So whether eligible for credit on food items supplied by outdoor caterer in such scenario or not. Yes, input in such scenario will very well be allowed, because as we had discussed when going through the restrictions, that in case of food and beverage service or in case of catering service, input tax credit is allowed only if the outward supply is also under the same category or as part of a composite supply. In this case, a hotel, when they provide accommodation with free breakfast, so the food part is factored in the cost of accommodation and it becomes part of the composite supply of accommodation. Therefore, in this case also, input can very validly be taken by such boarding and lodging service provider. Lastly, 17.5 speaks about non-availment of ITC. However, it is completely silent on utilization. So does that mean that the test of only availability is to be seen and one passed, the same can be utilized in any manner? I would say yes, because if we look into the history of the previous regime, that is service tax, there were two separate terminologies that were used, availment as well as utilization. When GST had come into place, there was just one word used, that was availability. Utilization was nowhere covered. This also created a lot of litigation in respect of Section 50, that is charging of interest. In the latest council meeting also, which happened a couple of days back, the government has taken another welcome step, that even for input tax credit, if it has been availed wrongly, however, if an assessee is having balance in the input tax credit ledger, interest is not payable. So the government has also accepted the distinction between availment and utilization. Therefore, in my opinion, insofar if I avail any input tax credit on the test of availability, later on I am very well eligible to utilize such input. Moving ahead, I've mentioned some recently AARs which are applicable or relevant for the discussion we had just had. So Tata Motors for Maharashtra had ruled that any nominal cost recovered from the employee towards the transportation is not liable to GST. It was observed that the employer is not providing any service to its employees. It was discussed right now in the case of the Infosys example. In case of a West Bengal AAR of Ishan Raisins and Paints, Section 17(5)(a) of the GST Act does not allow input tax credit on inward supply of motor vehicles of a specified category, and it does not apply to goods transport vehicle. This AAR was also discussed in the practical application issues which we discussed in the previous slides. In case of Polycab wires of Kerala AAR, it was adjudged that input tax credit shall not be available in respect of any goods lost, stolen, destroyed, written off, or disposed by way of gift of free samples. So, in the case of Polycab wires, the applicant had provided cables to various NGOs in Kerala when the Kerala was hit by a very strong storm. So it was adjudged that input tax credit is liable to be reversed. It is not allowed since it is the goods are given free of cost. However, there is a flip side to it also. If a company is providing any items or services under its CSR activities, an argument can be taken that CSR activities are being provided in the course or furtherance of business, because company law makes it a mandate for specified classes of companies to incur a 2% of their average 3 years profit as CSR expenditure. In that case, a company is bound, and once it is bound, then again it goes into the basic definition of used in the course or furtherance of business. So such expenses are incurred in the furtherance of business, and therefore ITC in that case should not be disputed. In case of a Himachal Pradesh AAR of Prasar Bharati Broadcasting Corporation, it was provided that any facility provided by a taxpayer for transportation of employees is not obligatory under the law, and therefore, in such cases, the applicant will be required to charge ITC as well as only if he claims such ITC at 12%. Caltech Polymer AR was also discussed that any expenses, food expenses, which are recovered by the employees, they will attract GST because this transaction is a supply and the applicant is allowed to claim input tax credit only on the amount of tax paid as output tax. Lastly, Safari Retreats Private Limited. This AR was actually this is a High Court judgment. This was given by the Odisha High Court and held that the interpretation by the department in case of 17.5 C and D is very narrow, and therefore, if any real estate, any construction or works contract service is an input service for a business entity and that is directly attributable for providing an output service, ITC should not be denied. Post this judgment was celebrated across the nation, and a number of assessees have started taking their input tax credit on such works contract input services. However, I would suggest that to be on the safer side, if any assessee has any works contract input service, they should avail the input tax credit but not utilize it. This input tax credit should be remaining in their credit ledger. Why I am saying so? Because the Ministry of Finance has appealed this case to the Honorable Supreme Court. The case, because of the corona pandemic, has been continuously being deferred. Once the judgment comes from the Supreme Court, then the position will be crystal clear, and then we can avail and utilize such ITC without any fear. Because if the judgment by the Supreme Court comes in reverse, then all the amount which has been utilized by an assessee will have to be paid back to the department along with 24% interest, which can have a very huge burden on the business. So with this, I conclude my presentation. I am once again very thankful to CS Sansa for giving me this opportunity. In case you have any queries, please do revert in the number and details provided, or you can mention in the comment box. I would also request you to please like and subscribe to the CS Ansar channel. Thank you so much.